Today's topic is, well, actually, if you were part of the group, then you'd already know what today's topic's going to be. Welcome to TableScraps, short discussions about board, card, and tabletop gaming, submitted by the viewing audience and discussed with the viewing audience. Hey there everyone, I'm Chaz Marler from Pair of Dice Paradise, and welcome back to another episode of TableScraps, the live streaming chat show where we discuss with the audience a topic about board, card, and tabletop gaming. And not only is the discussion done with the people in this chat window, but the topics themselves are suggested by the chat as well. Today's topic of discussion comes from viewer Patrick Doss, who wants to ask about newbies in your game group. Patrick says, are there games that you refuse to play with new players, or are there games that lend themselves towards a quote-unquote niche group, only to be exclusively played when those members are present? For example, I own all the expansions and figures for Star Wars Imperial Assault, and my group holds an exclusive game night to play through the various campaigns with no outsiders allowed to participate. Likewise, I own Cosmic Encounter and all of its expansions, making it difficult to teach to new gamers without taking out of all the added materials like the hazard deck, the Defender rewards, the technologies, the satellite add-ons, and more complex races, and all that stuff that adds flair to the game. Stripping away these elements makes the game feel, well, empty and defeats the purpose of buying the expansions in the first place. So, are there other examples of games that people refuse to play with newbies for one reason or another? The main problem that I ran into when starting to think about this topic was that I kept coming back to the point that, well, in one form or another, we were all newbies at one point. When I discovered gaming again, I found all of these gaming groups that I had no idea were right under my nose. Groups of between 10 to 60 people that get together in my area. And in fact, I discovered that there was a convention that takes place every March called Game Storm in Vancouver, Washington. So this was like the first actual gaming convention that I went to. I didn't know anybody there. I went alone. So I had no idea what to expect. It was my first multi-day gaming event like this. And I was the newbie. I had been collecting games for not even a year yet. I had no local game group of my own. And I went in there, and the first thing I did when they first opened the doors is I walked into the gaming hall and I stood in the middle of the gaming hall. I watched the people game. I had no idea what to do. I had no idea how to get into those groups. And someone came up to me, tapped me on the shoulder, and said, hey, you want to join us in a game of Diemocker? And I was like, sure, let's go. So I went and I joined him. Now, if anyone who doesn't know, Diemocker is a big, huge, massive 3+ hour game about manipulating the German political environment. It's it's fun and it's cool, but it is a big, hefty game that is, if of any game out there, if you're going to say, oh, we don't want newbies for this game, this would be the game not to introduce a newbie to. And this guy came up, saw me standing there looking lost, and invited me to play Diemocker. Just because someone might be inexperienced with a game, a genre of games, it might be a newbie, it's no reason really to exclude them just because of the preconceptions that we may have that their lack of experience may lead to a lack of playability. The other side of the coin here is, let's get back to Patrick's question, are there certain groups and games and stuff? Oh, absolutely, certainly. I have at least 3 different game groups that I play with. And one of them really likes Euro games. One of them is friends from high school that we really enjoy some co-ops and every now and then, some good backstabby type of games. And, then there's my wife and daughter. And when we play, there's, still for some reason backstabby stuff going on. But that happens even when we play non-backstabby games, like even Uno or Catan. It just happens. I don't understand why, but that's besides the point. The point I am making is that the reason why there are certain groups that I have established, and I know I play certain games with them, and these can be closed groups that I know I want to play with these certain players, isn't necessarily to exclude others, but it is because I've learned what these groups like, the kind of games that they enjoy, and the kind of experiences that we want to have together. So, Patrick, I think to me, I do kind of fall into that realm of, yes, I do set up certain gaming events that are set for just certain people, but it's not because I think noobs are disqualified from participating, if that makes any sense. Starting with our first statement here by Steven, who says, some games are heavy and just don't serve new gamers well. I love teaching new gamers, but brought out Ex Libris for new players, and one of the players was just lost. And, it was a bad feeling. You have to know your group, I guess. And there you go. Absolutely reinforces my own thinking on this. You gotta know the group. And sometimes, getting to know the group means introducing games that aren't going to be the best fit. And, even that trial and error experience can still be an enjoyable experience. So don't let that fear prevent you from trying new games and introducing people to a variety of games. Next comment comes from Trevin, who says, any game with a strong meta game is hard for newbies. From the unspoken rules of certain social deduction or the flow of Magic the Gathering, some things aren't explained in the rule book. Trevin continues to say, any game that benefits knowing the cards inside and out is hard for newbies. If all players know all the cards except one player, well, they're at a huge disadvantage. Well, that's absolutely true. And I think that goes back to kind of getting in that groove and learning which games to introduce to which people. Because if there's a strong meta there, it definitely can be a hindrance. And when you first mentioned meta, I was thinking more just how the people know each other. I might know that Bob is a real backstabber, or I might know that Randy over here loves to earn your trust and then backstab you because he does it every single game, and every single game it tricks you. But now I'm introducing my own baggage into the conversation, so let me move on. You're also talking about how the meta can, be a hindrance to newbies. That's absolutely true. And how do we handle that? Do we have to break off and have certain games that we play like just one-on-one with those newbies to bring them up to speed? Do we have all of the newbies play together to get them up to speed? Or do we just, do baptism of fire and just throw them in the game head first and see what happens? I'm, not sure what the best solution is. I assume, actually, that the best solution varies from person to person, from group to group. The next statement comes from Richard, who says, I feel like I've lost some newbies from my game group because the games were just too heavy. One fellow in particular, I think I overwhelmed, and he just hasn't come back. The word there in particular, the games were too heavy. You know what? I totally see that happening, but I want to back up and say any game doesn't have to be heavy. If the game is not the right fit, it can make them disappear. I've had game clubs that I've hosted, and I've had people show up that they show up for the first time on the wrong day, where just a game they don't like is the main game I'm introducing to people. And if they had come the week before or week after, they would have loved that game. And just the timing, the bad luck, they didn't like it, and so you never see them again. So I think it's not necessarily too heavy. Some people will dislike every genre of games. So keep that in mind too, that everybody is going to come into this with something different that they want to play. Trevin also mentions that poker is an example for why noobs can be bad. They don't know enough to actually play, they're just moving pieces. There's a meta to the betting that they don't understand, and it can ruin things. All right, Trevin, as a very poor poker player, I have a follow-up question then for you. I am such a poor poker player that I don't realize how bad I am, and I think I'm pretty good. So is there a level of newbiness where the newbie can still actually be enjoying the game just as much as the people who understand the meta, because they are basically happy with the level they are playing at. And they don't realize there's a whole nother level up here that they could be playing at that they're missing. They're perfectly fine just moving their pieces around down here. Does that have any effect on your argument at all? Let me know either in the chat or in the comments below. Trevin follows up to his previous statement about poker and my challenge to him to follow up on it with his follow-up, and says, oh, the new poker player has a great time. They just ruin everyone else's time. Fair enough. Fair enough, Trevin. Touche. Omar joins us to say, our board gaming community caters for noobs by having a table or two dedicated for newcomers along with guides, while the rest of the tables play their favorite heavier games. I know that I've mentioned in previous videos that I believe that it is the job of the host of the event to play the part of host or guide for these people. And whether or not it's the host doing it, the fact that your gaming community actually has, dedicated guides for each game day to play that part, to facilitate that type of learning experience, that is fantastic. I hope that becomes a trend that many more gaming events and gaming clubs can follow, because that's a very inviting environment. Toyota Wolf joins us to say that Arkham Horror 2nd Edition with multiple expansions can be a nightmare to introduce to new players. Most games with lots of expansions are this way. That's a really good point there, Toyota, because we've been talking about the games themselves, like heavy games or whatever. But yeah, let's talk about expansions for a minute real quick. Boy, I don't know about you guys, but how many times, I cannot count because I don't have that many fingers and toes, but I have trouble counting how many games I have purchased expansions for that I have still in like a separate bag or in their box, still segregated away from the core game, because I haven't, every time I play that core game, I'm introducing it to someone new, or it hasn't hit the table enough for us to feel like we've mastered the core game. And so these expansions just sit waiting to be played, because if we were to introduce them all at once, yeah, it would be way too overwhelming. How does that compare to your experience? Let me know, and let's compare some notes. Toyota also mentions, I also find that games with take that mechanics can cause newbies to run away too. Definitely, it definitely can be one of the genres that seems to lend itself to scaring away people. If a game with a lot of take that where someone can feel like they're being picked on. Definitely some place to tread cautiously. Let's continue on to another statement from Richard, who says, no, the games were physically too heavy. Oh, talking about heavy games that were hard to introduce. But he's talking about they were physically heavy. We made the newbie move the Gloomhaven box. Oh, well, right there, that you can strain a muscle doing that. Gloomhaven has got to be 18 pounds or so. It's insane. But he says, no, your point is well taken. We just had the wrong games for him. Oh, you fooled me. You gave me a bit of a poser there. What with your question, with your you tricked me, Richard. I fell for it. You tricked me and I fell for it. And I don't think I'll ever forgive you, but I'll work on it. I might work on it. Our next statement coming from Omar again, who follows up to say, but do a lot of games actually have a meta associated with them? Oh, very good question. The only one I've come across with a particular group is Secret Hitler, where it always goes to the last chance vote before everyone says yes. Do a lot of games actually have meta associated with them? Poker was mentioned and Magic the Gathering was mentioned. Any collectible card game would fit into this, I believe. Any game with lots of various rules that can be introduced into it. But do a lot of games? That's a really good question. And you know what? I'm not going to spout out my thought on it quite yet. That's what I'm going to turn over to the community. Do you think that there are more games that have a meta that can be prohibitive to newbies than not? Or do you think that modern board games in general have come to the point where they're sophisticated enough that they can get their point across without too much trouble for newbies. Let me know what you think, and that might actually branch off into another episode in the future. But in the meantime, let's continue on to the next comment from MM, who says, for me, it depends a lot on the size of the group. For a small group that might have noobs, the heavier gamers can just have to deal with it if they want to play. For bigger groups, they can split off. Fair enough. In your experience, could this lend to kind of niches, groups of people? Basically, can this lead to the newbies all getting corralled together by themselves to figure things out while the established groups of friends go off and play, where you always end up having kind of the same, you might have 60 people show up for your gaming event, but you end up with the same 10 groups of 6 sitting at each table, never to mix or mingle. I have to admit, I run into this myself. I'm guilty of this all the time. And when I do it, I hide behind the justification that I'm just being shy and I'm more comfortable playing with the people I know. But a lot of the game groups I go to, I see that, you'll go and week after week, month after month, it's the same clusters of people sitting at all these tables. So even if you have a large group, it can feel to a newbie like a small group that can be uninviting. Again, everyone, let me know how your experience compares to my own. Let's wrap up this episode with a comment from Axand Troll, who says, I am always hesitant to teach nuclear war to new people. And I believe that nuclear war is one of those games that basically it never ends well. And it just ends in total player annihilation and such. The ultimate in player elimination, I would suppose. If I'm thinking of the correct game. I'm thinking of a game from the late 70s, early 80s, I think. But it might have been a different one. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is it underscores how important it is for us as game guides, to borrow a term from Omar, for us as game guides to really help when we're bringing in newbies into the hobby, to go out of our way to not only create an environment where they can play games, but to actually find out what interests them and what they're going to be comfortable playing and, help facilitate that as well. I think that, as ambassadors to the hobby, it's really important for us to remember. However, if there's any other comments on this, we're going to have to also keep that in our memory banks because we've run out of time for this episode. So I want to thank everybody in the live chat who has taken the time to contribute and participate in this today's episode. And for more board game videos about news, questions, commentary, that's not what the videos are about. The videos are actually about board games and stuff. Watch a video, you'll figure it out. But in the meantime, I've been Chaz Marler from Pair of Dice Paradise, who, along with the live streaming chat, have been serving up some table scraps. Thanks. Talk to you again soon. Hold on, let me make my mind completely blank. Well, that was easy. Huh. Actually, that's pretty much the norm. All right, we're good to go. Excuse me. I'll edit that out, hopefully. The heater turned on, and in the last 3 minutes, the temperature has raised about 10 degrees. So my apologies if I die from heat stroke. I think it's gone up another 12 degrees, which is fantastic. It keeps the blood pumping. All right, let's continue on to some more questions before we run out of the times or melt.